Glory told him, "I'd like to begin the semester with a fun, casual game. How about war? Conquest? What do you kids think?" Curtis raised his hand and suggested, "How about a team muck battle with 3 disciplinary committee officers on one team?" Glory accepted the suggestion. Clive advised Princess Tesha and I could be their opponents on the other team. Glory found it interesting, having the disciplinary committee against the student council. They were still lacking one member, and Lucas Wykes volunteered. Lucas Wykes said to Arthur, "So, you are the conner who stole my spot in the disciplinary committee." Arthur replied, "It is not stealing if it was never yours to begin with." Before the battle began, Tasha walked up to Arthur to help him equip gear. Arthur said, "Should Princess Tasha really be helping me like this?" Tasha replied, "Please refrain from talking so loudly, Professor Lewin." Tasha further added, "I hate having to act like I don't know you." Arthur responded, "Then don't." Tasha said, "But Master Cynthia told me you wanted to keep a low profile." Arthur said, "Well, I have not been doing a very good job of that, so it is all right as long as a few things are still secret. Sylvie's true identity, the level of my mana core, and have you noticed anything?" Tasha replied, "I can't sense your water." Arthur stopped her and said secretly, "I am keeping most of my abilities secret for now, so I would appreciate it if you do the same. But you don't have to ignore me, Tess." Glory walked over to them and said, "You chew enough fraternizing with the enemy. We will be starting in 2 minutes." Before the battle began, Glory informs them that the match would have a time limit of 30 minutes, after which they would have a short discussion and analysis of what played out. Team DC would have a handicap since Curtis and Claire had more classical training than Team SC with 2 first years. The handicap was that Arthur Lewin would play the role of the king. Knock him out, and the whole team loses. The gear you are using is specially designed by artificers to measure the amount of damage dealt. If the amount of damage surpasses the threshold encrypted, it will release a shrill noise. Glory continued, "Anyone who chooses to ignore this warning and continues to fight or cast spells will be immediately banned from my class and may be up for expulsion. This equipment will not protect you. You should be advanced enough to protect yourself with mana, but you can still be injured while wearing it. Now let the battle commence." Claire battle with Clive, Curtis battle with Tasha. Arthur wondered Curtis probably won't be able to beat Tess, but he should be able to hold her off long enough. So Arthur battled with Lucas. Arthur thought he might have gotten a bit more humble since coming to Xyrus Academy, but not even. Lucas said, "What has taken you so long? Scared that your reputation might crumble after you lose today." Arthur then released his bloodlust and cast Wind Sprint to Lucas. Lucas quickly cast Manifest and Burn. Arthur defend with Earth Spike. Lucas again cast Fire Rain, which like a tracker keep chasing Arthur. Meanwhile, from Sylvie, info Mama is winning against Curtis. Claire is winning against Grumpy Guy. Arthur informs Sylvie, tell him if something unusual happens. While dodging Lucas's spell, Arthur wonder his mana pool is even larger than when he was an adventurer. Arthur tried to get to close range but blocked by the fire spell, as without fire or water attribute mana, he can't do anything against this heat, and his mana pool won't be able to keep up with his. Lucas said, "I am glad I did not join the disciplinary committee. If I were on the same team as someone as incompetent as you, I might have actually quit school." Arthur wonder, "I can't conjure a wind spell large enough to go up against this. Wind magic simply put is pushing, pulling, and manipulating air in order to achieve desired effects. But what if I were to manipulate the air particles themselves? I could get rid of the very thing that fire needs to keep burning." From Glory thought she wonder Lucas is better than she heard Inferno's Cage is one of the tougher flame attribute domain spells, yet he is able to use it so proficiently at such a young age. On top of that, his mana reserve seemed to almost rival that of a silver core mage. For Arthur, he seems lacks variation in his spells for a dual elemental mage, but makes up for it with fluid movements and tight control. I was only mildly curious about the kid who was able to best a veteran adventurer, even one as careless as Geist. Soon Glory noticed Arthur's action. He is holding his breath and wonder at that little monster. Unlike wind magic, trying to manipulate the air itself involves much more insight and higher levels of concentration and chanting in order to properly spellcast. Is why there are not mages capable of just sucking the air out of their opponent's lungs. It would take hours of concentration to manipulate the air directly inside a moving living target. That is why mages either use their own body as the source or a pre-designated unmovable location. Arthur currently manipulating a thin layer of air around his body to form a vacuum and disperse the fire before it hits him. Arthur wonder, at this rate my uniform is going to reach its threshold before I get the hang of it. Lucas thought, how is he able to block my spells like that? I don't see any wind magic being used, but it doesn't matter. Lucas spawned his flame guardian and Arthur wondered if he had finally reached his limit. Suddenly, Arthur sensed a sudden surge of mana. Sylvie told him Mama is in danger. Arthur defended a hit from the Guardian and noticed glory flying towards Tesha, but it seemed too late. Arthur cast Static Void and ran towards Tesha, as he had already used most of his mana reserves trying to learn the vacuum barrier spell. Arthur noticed Curtis releasing his beast's will, and Tesha seemed weirdly unprotected, as she had not put any defensive barrier around herself. Arthur wondered if he had enough mana to block this attack, so he hugged Tesha, thinking, this is going to hurt. Going back a few minutes before, Tesha wondered if Art was doing okay. Even if it was him, it would be difficult to win while only using his two weakest elements. Curtis attacked her, saying it is bad manners to look away from your opponent. While Tesha cast a wind spell to push Curtis away, she suddenly wondered what was wrong. Curtis told Grotter his bond, let's attack just like we have been practicing. Tesha cast Root's Snare to block them, but she still felt that something was wrong with her core. She wondered, am I not properly assimilating to the Elderwood Guardian's core? Maybe I should forfeit. But then she thought, I am the student council president. I can't have anyone thinking that I am weak, much less a coward. Tesha continued to try to cast a spell, but meanwhile, Curtis and Grotter had already cast World's Hell. A powerful blow was attacking Tesha, and she fainted halfway through. Soon after the explosion subsided, Glory noticed Arthur is here and wondered how he had gotten there. Curtis quickly said, Professor, I didn't mean to. I didn't know she would faint. Glory instructed Dagal to get the rest of the team on standby and start assessing the damage. When Arthur opened his eyes, Sylvie was mad and stared at him. She said, Papa is an idiot. You think you are so strong, but you keep almost dying. What would Sylvie do without Papa? Arthur apologized and said, You're right, I have been a little reckless. Don't worry, I won't even leave you. Meanwhile, Cynthia knocked on the door. From their conversation, it seemed that Tesha was in a much better state than Arthur. Arthur mentioned that it was the beast's will, right? Her body couldn't handle it. Cynthia was curious about how he knew that. Arthur explained, I am the one giving her that beast's will. I should be the one to help her with the assimilation, but I don't think I can in the state. Cynthia replied, This is my fault. I kept the knowledge of Tasha's beast's will a secret. She is at the stage of the assimilation process where she is most vulnerable. If I had at least told Professor Glory, this might have been avoided. So, thank you for sacrificing yourself to save my disciple. Arthur told her to stop and said, You make it sound like I am dying. Cynthia continued, I have contacted the royal family as well as your own. I should be here soon, so you should get some rest until then. After Cynthia left, she asked Tesha, Are you sure you don't want to go in? Tesha replied, Not yet. I don't think I can. Besides, he should rest. Soon Arthur's family arrived. Alice asked, How did you, of all people, get hurt so badly like this on the first day of school? Ray laughed and said, How else? It looks like our son is already getting into fights at school. Arthur replied, You should see what the other guy looks like. Alice wondered, What has my son done? Whose poor child did he obliterate, leaving nothing but ashes? And we will have to move and live underground with the dwarves. I can't help out by healing miners. But what about Ali? And a voice from behind said, He is only joking, Mrs. Lewin. Cynthia brought Tesha's family to visit Arthur. Reynolds and Alice quickly said, It is an honor to meet you in person, your majesties. Aldwin said, The honor is mine. We are finally able to meet the parents of the one who has saved our child not once, but twice now. Aldwin then introduced Virion and his daughter. The moment Alice and Reynolds saw Tesha, they quickly turned back to stare at Arthur when they turned back to see each other with a tricky smile. Alice held Tesha's hand and said, We are so glad to finally meet you as well. Arthur has told us so much about you. It's such a comfort knowing that he has someone as responsible as you by his side. Alice leaned closer to Tesha and whispered, Now and in the future. Tesha felt bashful, and Virion asked Arthur how he was feeling. Arthur said, I am a little worried about what they are scheming. Virion replied, Relax. The worst that can happen is you become my grandson-in-law. Tesha quickly said, I am sorry for all of this, Art. I told them not to come, but they would not listen, even though it is all my fault that you ended up here in the first place. Leaner said, So you are the girl my brother risked his life to save. Tesha noticed that she is Arthur's little sister, and she said, You are even prettier than I thought. Leaner seemed angry with Tesha, but still said, Thanks for that, and you're not bad yourself. Arthur said, Ellie, she's the one that gave you that bow for your birthday. And Alina said thanks again. Suddenly, Alina pointed at Tesha and asked Arthur, who is prettier, me or her? Arthur responded, You guys are both pretty ugly to me. Both Ellie and Alina wondered, You are lucky you are hurt right now. Arthur asked Virion, How is Tessa's mana core? Virion replied, Luckily, her body seems more compatible with the beast core than yours when you first integrated. By the way, How the hell did you manage to pick up an Elderwood Guardian's beast core? Arthur told him. By killing one, of course. Cynthia said, while I hate to disrupt such an amiable setting, but Tasha's assimilation must be monitored once more. Besides, there are quite a few other visitors stuck outside due to the maximum capacity of this room. After Arthur's family left with Tasha's family, he continued to have more visitors throughout the day. Some came wanting answers for what exactly happened, while others came out of pure concern for his health. Gideon told him, "Oh, and after you recover a bit, you should stop by your personal training room." Arthur questioned, "How do you know about that?" Gideon replied, "Director Goodsky asked me to build some training artifacts for you. Besides, now you owe me." Soon Tasha come back to find Arthur telling him that she's still recovering, so Master Goodsky wanted she to stop early. Arthur questioned, "How is your core feeling? Did you have another episode of pain like before? Or what about any sort of pressure?" Tasha laughed, said, "You almost died, and you are still worrying about me. It was the same back then when you saved me from the bandits." Tasha said, "Let me apologize." Arthur replied, "I told you not to apologize for saving you again. What is done is done." Tasha replied, "No, not because of that, for taking advantage of you like this." Soon Tasha ran out from the room. "Wonder that was my first kiss. Did I do it right? I probably came on too strong. He is going to think I am improper, and Lude should just go back to his room and pretend it was all a joke." Tasha quickly comforted herself. "You did the right thing, Tess. Things would never progress if you left it up to Art. He still just treats you like a child every time you are together. This was all for the best." Back to Arthur's site. "You wonder I kissed Tasha, a 13-year-old girl. Am I a criminal now?" Arthur wondered, "No, I am still in the body of a 12-year-old boy. And in this world there are plenty of children our age that are getting ready to marry. And she was the one that kissed me. But still, goddamn this stupid body with these raging teenage hormone. Calm yourself." A few days later, Arthur got discharged from the hospital. And tomorrow will be his first day teaching. But before that, Gideon said, "Let's get the show on the road. I have made it a bit of a game to try and dumbfound this cheeky little brat." When Arthur entered his training room, he found it as impressive. Gideon told him, "Look at my artifact. Not the room, damn it." Cynthia curious, "There seems to be quite a bit of mana fluctuations radiating from this. What is this thing?" Gideon proudly explained it is capable of adjusting its runes and mana barrier output to withstand spells from initiate and even mid-tier silver mages. "This is the latest and greatest edition of my training operator and blast inductor, otherwise known as Tobai." Gideon said, "I have currently set its base specs to level 5, which translates roughly to that of a dark orange core mana beast." Arthur laughed and said, "So you are saying that right now, that dummy is about as strong as a yellow core human then?" Gideon replied, "Tobai has a solid malagorite iron body, so while the attacks that he will produce are on that level, his overall durability is even higher." Before his words finished, Tobai was broken by a punch. Arthur said, "It looks like we are going to have to raise Tobai's level, Gideon." But meanwhile, at another site, a few soldiers were discussing, "Have you seen wraith skulls this big or this sickly gray in color?" Lance Baron asked, "Are you certain that no humans, elves, or dwarves have set foot in this dungeon?" The soldier replied, "Yes. The only entrance down here had long been closed off, according to the specialists." Lance Baron wondered, and this just became much more serious. Back to Arthur's site. He's testing Tobai level 7. After a few rounds of attacks, he found out that Tobai's joints are a pretty bad weak spot, so he had to work on reinforcing those. Additionally, even if they can't conjure spells for a mage, it is a bit limiting that they can't fire any offensive elemental magic. Gideon replied, "Well, I assumed Tobai would be sparring against an augmenter, not the devil incarnate. Anything else?" Arthur replied, "Well, this is a bit of a nuance, but I think Tobai's mana reinforcement can use some work. Right now, Tobai is emitting a layer of protective mana around its body. Even though it is the fastest and easiest way for a mage to protect themselves, it is also weak to attacks targeting the same place. It might be a bit more complicated and extensive, but it would be better if Tobai could conjure an array of individual plates of mana interconnected with each other. That way, once the initial barrier is set up, it will be easier for Tobai to mend its barrier more quickly when it breaks, without having to waste excessive amounts of mana from its crystal to conjure up a completely new barrier." Gideon, Cynthia, and Elijah were stunned and staring at Arthur. They questioned, "Do you mean to tell me you are able to conjure a mana barrier like that?" With a nod from Arthur, Cynthia replied, "Intriguing. While the initial cast of applying that sort of mana barrier might take longer, it would still offer much more flexibility than the traditional mana shroud that mages use these days." Soon, while Arthur was on his way to his first day as a professor, he wondered, "Maybe I should not have gone up against 2 level 7 Tabas when I haven't fully healed." Then he was tripped and fell, so he grabbed the person in front of him, which was Kathleen. Kathleen then assisted Arthur to the classroom. Aerith was listening to how the students commented on the new professor. Some of them found it funny watching him stutter and pretend like he knows what he is doing, while others felt embarrassed and decided to record and report it to the school. Aerith wondered, "May the gods be with you, my rival. I will cheer for you in spirit." The moment the door opened, everyone was stunned. Aerith thought, as expected of my rival, he sure knows how to make an entrance. Arthur told Kathleen that he was fine and started his introduction. He expected the students to yell at him to get out of there, saying, "What makes you think I had wasted my time learning from a first year?" Suddenly, a student jumped in front to Arthur saying, "Just suddenly feel like I want to be a professor now." Arthur instantly released pressure, told him to sit, and said Director Goodsky did not bother giving me any official documents, but like it or not, I will be teaching this class. If anyone has a problem with this, feel free to leave. I won't stop you. In fact, I will even allow you to be placed into another class of your choice. However, if any of you are even a tiny bit curious as to how this little boy with a limp got to become a professor at the most prestigious magic academy in Dickathon, I encourage you to stay and learn. Arthur again questioned the student again, "Are you gonna stay there? Either leave or go back to your seat." The student instantly said, "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir." Now then, since this is a practical mana manipulation class, I will ask a practical question. What is the best way to utilize mana from the surrounding atmosphere? The class go well with Q&A and also practical part, with Arthur's ability and teaching method. Most of the students start to learn something from him. While he wondered, this is the good thing about being a professor, I can end class as early as I want. Kathleen sat beside him, telling him it was a good lesson. I muted for a few seconds. Kathleen then said, "There is something I've been meaning to tell you for a while now." Arthur thought, is Kathleen going to profess her love for me too? As she ultimately succumbed to the unique and acquired taste that is Arthur Lewin. Will I really be the cause of a civil war between the two races? Kathleen said, "Please accept my deepest apology on behalf of my family for what happened with Sebastian at the auction house, for how my father behaved afterwards, and for my brother's blunder both in the alleyway and now. My family was wronged you in." Before word in, she noticed and said, "What are you doing?" Arthur replied, humbling myself, "Anyway, I am surprised you are so bothered by things that happened over 4 years ago." Kathleen continued, "While I has always looked up to my father in many ways, he had disappointed me that day. I felt like apologize was necessary, saying as we are friends." Kathleen thought she had grown up blaming her lineage, my magical prowess, and even my physical appearance for robbing me of my freedom. Yet how can a boy so talented and sought after, so scrutinized and judged? Soon Arthur attended to Gideon class. Being dismissed, Emily told Arthur that I already have a couple OPA I made for fun. "You can have one if you want, since you missed a few days of classes." Arthur immediately turned his emotion to enthusiasm, told Emily, "You are a lifesaver." Then Elijah walked to Arthur, told him, "Director Goodsky asked me to make sure you head to the training room." Arthur told them, "You two get acquainted then. I will see you later." But when Arthur reached training room, he noticed Tesha alone is here. Tesha told him that Cynthia said that something urgent came up and left not too long ago. Arthur wondered, must be Cynthia's scheme for this whole thing. Tesha questioned Arthur, "Should we get started?" Assimilation with any beast took a lot of effort and most times could not be done alone. While oftentimes a mage of the same elemental affinity as the beast itself was needed to take some of the burden away from the host, Arthur was a quadra-elemental mage, who, using even balance of all 4 elements, he was able to not only help assimilate Tasha with her beast will. He acted as a sort of refined mana battery, strengthening Tasha's body and helping her fight against the Elderwood Guardian trying to establish control over her core. Soon they are done of assimilation. Tasha questioned, "Are you mad that I kissed you?" Arthur replied, "I am not mad. I was surprised, but never mad." Tasha said, "Then why have you been avoiding me since then?" Arthur responded, "Come on, Tess. We are still both so young, and I have known you since you were an immature little girl. I know it is not weird for a girl your age to get married since you are royalty, but I mean, I don't have that background." Tasha continued, "You are just making excuses now. You and I both know I did not mean we should get married. I know it was wrong of me to take advantage of you back then, but I just want things to progress." And Arthur replied, "I think we have progressed a lot since 8 years ago." Tasha got mad and telling Arthur, "Enough. I did not expect an answer from you, but I at least wanted you to take this seriously. Sorry I expected so much." Before she leaving, she said, "You know, Arthur, you are so confident about so many things, magic, fighting, wits. But you know what? There are things you are no good at. You don't think the people around you have noticed how you always put on a mask and pretend you are happy or unaffected by anything. Even now, your reaction was to try and make light of my feelings toward you and even tease me in a way. Are not you the one being immature? Like the way you rejected Lilia." Arthur wondered, how did she know that? Did she overhear or did Lilia tell her? It is not like I can tell you who I was in the past, and how old I actually am. While Arthur was busy recalled back what Tesha told him, Glory knocked the door. She said, I came to check up on you since both you and Princess Tesha skipped out on my class. Arthur closed the door and tell her that I was just doing some training and Tesha is not here with me. Glory replied, is that right? I guessed wrong then. She approached Arthur, you already missed my class. And one more, you have to at least make it to your last class right. Arthur accepted, all Glory, though a private training room accessible only to Arthur is one thing, but one that large. And what sort of training causes a non-reinforced room to look like that? The more I see this boy, the more mysterious he gets. Soon Arthur was in Professor Maynard's class, but no matter what Professor said, Arthur thought was about his fight with Tasha. He did not think her words would bother him so much. Sylvie said it is because what Mama said was true. Arthur asked her, whose side are you on? Besides, there were plenty that hated me while I was an adventurer, but that never slowed me down. Sylvie replied, because you actually care about Mama. Arthur, said Sylvie, how am I supposed to remain blissfully unaware of my shortcomings when you are so insightful like this? Arthur said, you know, I may be distracted, but you could have at least tried to be a bit less obvious. Lucas. Charles said, we just wanted to make sure you got back to your dorm safely. And Marquand warned him that even in Xyrus Academy it can get dangerous after all. Arthur replied, am I in danger of having my pants pulled down as well? Lucas pulled away Charles and asked Arthur, did you think I had forgotten about how you ran off during our duel? If you kept avoiding me with your tail tucked between your legs, how did you do that? Arthur explained, there was a hole in the ground. But Lucas interrupted, questioning, I am asking how you escaped my Inferno cage spell and arrived halfway across the training arena. Arthur grabbed Lucas' hand, telling him, that is not how you ask someone for answers. And secondly, why the hell should I tell you? Lucas arrogantly said, you used an artifact, right? How did a commoner brat like you get your hands on something like that anyway? Maybe that little minx of an elf in our class got it for you? Princess Tesha was it? Marquand suddenly yelled, I bet you used tricks like that to seduce Princess Kathleen too. His mana started leaking out. He told Charles to shut up and that he needs to learn his place. Even Charles tried to stop him, but Lucas told Charles to just leave him. Marquand said, Princess Kathleen deserves someone better. She deserves a pure human of noble blood like me. Soon Marquand seemed crazy and took the handkerchief that Kathleen had picked up for him before and smelled it. Lucas thought, that fatus has gone crazy. Sylvie noticed that something was wrong with him. Next second, the student cast earth magic and punched Arthur. Sylvie seemed angry, but Arthur told her to wait. Arthur barely dodged the attack and warned Charles and Lucas, do you realize you are attacking one of the disciplinary committee members right now? Lucas acted like it was not his business and said, in fact, we are terrified right now at what is happening. Lucas told Charles, weren't you worried about losing against Marquand in your dueling class next week? And who cares? Either he will hurt himself badly here, or our dear DC officer will get him expelled. And they decided to leave. Lucas laughed with the words, try not to get hurt again. I wouldn't want you running away from our next duel. Marquand seemed crazy and cast his earth magic to cover his head and both hands. Arthur wondered how his orange core could possess such strength. He has even more mana than Lucas, and he is using it purely offensively. Arthur thought, I might have to release my seal if I want to capture him without killing him. But Sylvie transformed into her dragon form with a slam, and then transformed back, saying, I was done waiting. Soon, Claire ran towards them and said, I was scouting nearby when I sensed a large mana fluctuation. What happened? Arthur explained, I don't exactly know. He just started bursting with mana before going crazy and attacking me. Claire immediately noticed the dark bloody symbols and said, damn it, not another one. Arthur questioned Claire if there were more cases like him at school, and Claire replied, just one, which happened while you were still recovering in the medical ward. Claire told Arthur that she would share more information during their next DC meeting and that she needed to update the rest of the team. She advised Arthur to inform Director Goodsky about everything. After knocking, they noticed Lance Baron and Lance Aaliyah are here. Cynthia introduced Arthur and Claire as members of the disciplinary committee and some of the most promising mages of their generation. Claire expressed her honor and mentioned her dream of becoming a Lance. Lance Baron continued requesting that appropriate measures be taken as soon as possible. As they were leaving, Lance Aaliyah wished Claire good luck and expressed support for her. Sylvie commented to Arthur that the Lances were strong to soon. They had a conversation discussing everything that had just happened. Cynthia explained that neither the medics nor the artificers knew exactly what was happening. They had contacted the Mage Guild to send researchers to assist Gideon and their own staff. Cynthia instructed Claire to continue with DC patrols and mentioned that she would assign more staff to assist. But Arthur caught her facial expressions that she might know something. After they left, Avira appeared and questioned whether it was wise to involve the students and the situation. Cynthia responded that if the worst-case scenario were to occur, sacrifices might be necessary as they had come too far. Cynthia wondered why things were progressing so quickly as it was much too early. While Arthur on his way back, he noticed Lance Baron was scolding Lucas. Arthur wonders so, even that arrogant brat has his head down in front of his brother. You wonder with his brother backing him, I can't do anything to Lucas. Suddenly, Sylvie and Arthur noticed dangerous. Lancelia said that is a pretty strong bloodlust you are emanating toward a lance, and her weapon is on Arthur's neck. But she quickly dispelled it and said one of the drawbacks of storing your weapon in a dimension ring. It takes too long to call it out. Arthur replied, I think there has been a misunderstanding. I don't harbor any anger towards Lance Baron. It was my first time even meeting him earlier today. Lancelia said even if you were repressing your presence, I can tell you now. Of course you would not be able to touch him even as a dual elemental mage. Arthur questioned, is Lance Baron really that strong? Lancelia replied, frighteningly so. When Arthur questioned Lancelia, how strong is she? She answered about this strong. Then she come to Arthur besides saying you could have at least given me a chuckle or something. I'm definitely the weakest amongst the lances, so there is quite a big margin between us. Arthur pat on her, which let Lancelia wonder why does this feel even more insulting. Lancelia continued, Baron is definitely one of the strongest, but even he can't match up to my level of perception. Arthur wonders so that is how she was able to sense me long before I even noticed her. Lancelia told him Baron is finishing up. It was nice talking to you, kid, maybe we will run into each other again. Arthur thanked her for entertaining the questions of a mere student. Lance Allard pat on his head saying if my little brother were still here, he'd be about your age. So thank you. Next day, Arthur received news from Clave that Marquis had died the previous night. Curtis mentioned that despite the efforts of the artificers and medics, they couldn't stop the leakage of Marquis mana even when he was unconscious. Clave added that it had something to do with the symbols on his back. Kathleen and Kyra marked that they were not disclosing what they had found, and even their parents refused to reveal anything at this point. Arthur was assigned to patrol with Theodore, and both Fairith and Arthur were surprised to discover that the daggers they were given were actually communication devices. Kathleen commented, I'm even more surprised that Kai was the one who volunteered to patrol by himself, covering a pretty large portion of the campus. Arthur wondered, are you really surprised? Because that's not what your face is saying. Fairith had heard from Curtis that Kai had a reputation for avoiding work, and during the discussion, Curtis was against Kathleen patrolling with Arthur, as Kathleen mentioned that Arthur had become her friend after they had shared skinship. Arthur and Fairith thought, so that's why. Soon, it was time for Arthur's class as a professor. He questioned the students about whether the color of a mage's mana core was a truly accurate way of measuring their level. Aerith raised his hand to answer, and other students assumed he would know the answer as one of the DC officers. However, Fairith's answer turned out to be wrong. Arthur continued, the color of a mage core does not take into account their wits, reaction speed, battle sense, or knowledge of spells. It would be like judging a warrior's combat ability by the size of their muscles. We can say for certain that someone is strong, but we can't say they are a better fighter than someone with less muscles. As Arthur reached Glory's class, he was rejected by her. Glory told him, I am not going to risk having you out here until you are fully recovered. I'll sit in the stands. Arthur thought, at least I don't have to deal with Lucas pestering me for another duel. Sylvie excitedly jumped to Tesha. Both Arthur and Tesha remained silent for a few seconds. As Arthur began to say something, Tasha interrupted him, saying, you don't have to explain yourself, Art. I lashed out too and said things I wish I hadn't. Arthur denied, saying there were a lot of truths in what you said to me earlier. To a certain extent, I think I didn't know how you felt about me, but I was always afraid to face it. Emotions are a lot more complicated than magic or fighting. I can't get better at it just by training. Tasha replied, it's the same for me. I lost control over my emotions and brought up the thing with Lilia when she told me never to tell anyone. Arthur responded, no, you are much better than me. I was just running away from you all this time, and you don't deserve that. I'm sorry, but I can't have a relationship with you right now. At least for now. Tesha questioned, for now? Arthur said maybe when we are older. Tesha immediately replied, so you are assuming that I will wait for you? Arthur replied, I am not assuming that. I know how popular you are, and to be honest, I don't even know how long it will take for me to be ready. Tesha replied, good, as long as you know. Tesha pointed on Arthur's face, said, I can trust you, right? You are not going to go around dating other girls at school after saying all of this to me, right? Arthur immediately said, I can personally guarantee that. Tesha sighed and said, I guess that will have to do for now. Arthur's stand-up said, also, I really don't any intention of making you wait for me, but I hope this will buy me some time. Arthur was stunned, wonder what he did. Sylvie laughed on him and said you kissed Mama. Arthur told Sylvie shut up. It was just the forehead. Putting that aside, Arthur wondered, why is this class still just barely covering the basics of deviant magic theory when it has been over a week since classes began? Back to Tasha. She felt baffled as Arthur kissed her. Tasha wondered, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but what our kids would look like. Next second, wait, but in order to have kids, Art and I would have to. Imagine yourself. Two student painting words on wall, but spotted by Arthur after they noticed it as a DC officer, they start to run. Theodore caught back the red-haired guy and checked there is no symbols on his back. Sylvie checked the girl as well, none on her either. Theodore told Arthur he will send these two back. Arthur wondered, it looks like I am nearing Kai's patrol route. Meanwhile, Sylvie sensed weird mana. Arthur hide behind and follow the red symbol guys secretly. Arthur wondered if there really are more of them. We need him to lead us to their hideout. Suddenly Kai yelled Arthur, which alerted the black robe. When Arthur turned his head back, it is already missed. Heck, Cassiton, what are you doing here, Arthur? Arthur told him he was tailing someone possibly related to Marquand. I could have found out where they may be hiding. I said even if that is the case, you should have notified me as soon as you saw whoever you were following coming into my area of patrol. Heck questioned, where is Theo? Not he, your partner. Arthur said we caught a couple students drawing graffiti on the wall. Theodore is escorting them to the admin office. Heck questioned, so there is no one patrolling your area. At the same time, the communication device glowing yellow, which Theo activated his dagger. I told Arthur, since this is my area, I will try to find the person you were tailing. You go help your partner. Soon, according to Theodore, Wordy got whacked in the back. It had to be a strike from a powerful augmenter. Curtis said he got ambushed while taking the two students to the admin building. They were gone by the time we got here, but we should be able to find them since they are students anyway. Theodore said it is not their friend. A normal student would not be able to knock him out with just one hit. It's gotta be someone older or someone like Marquand. Theodore said, I think I managed to barely graze him before I blacked out, but no visual at all. Arthur questioned Sylvie in his mind, did not Kai have an injury on his arm? Sylvie replied, I think so. When Theodore questioned Arthur, what were you doing coming from Kai's area? Arthur thought telling them about the hooded guy won't do any good right now, especially for Theo. So he told them nothing much. Theo and Doradria noticed that Arthur seemed skeptical of Kai, so they explained that despite his deceptive appearance, Kai is actually a reliable person for a human. Arthur thought to himself, in the end, we couldn't find Theodore's attacker, and even worse, Kai couldn't locate the hooded individual. It still bothers me that Kai called out my name so loudly. Am I overthinking it? Theo advised Arthur to trust Kai, but his timing and the injury on his arm make it difficult. Nevertheless, Arthur decided to focus more, realizing that he couldn't recall what happened in his first two classes. Meanwhile, Emily bumped into Arthur and gave him the light-producing artifact he had been seeking. During Glory's class, Arthur pondered the lenient punishment Lucas received after his involvement with Marquand. Arthur noticed that Glory seemed upset, and she informed him that the council had banned excursions into most of the dungeons she usually took her class to. Lances were investigating something, so the trip for the semester would be to a lower-level dungeon compared to their usual destinations. After helping Tasha with her assimilation, Arthur wondered if there were any rejection symptoms from her beast within these days. Tasha told him no. Arthur continued, assuming nothing bad happens with our current rate, you should be fully assimilated in a few weeks. If we are lucky, your core may even become a level high. Meanwhile, while they splashing water each other, Cynthia said, you two look like you are having fun. But when Arthur turned his head, he noticed Cynthia got injured. Cynthia told them nothing to worry, she wanted to stretch these old bones, so she stopped by the Mages Guild and had a lively sparring session. Arthur questioned, I thought you were meeting with the council. Cynthia continued, am I not allowed to make a quick detour after to relieve some stress? Tasha said, still, you should not push yourself so hard to the point of getting hurt like this. While Arthur was leaving, he wondered, she is definitely hiding something, but it is not my place to pry. During Arthur's next class, Professor Avius addressed the students, saying, I know many of you have heard about what happened to your fellow classmate a few days ago. In light of this tragic event, I feel it is imperative to teach you about the dangers of wielding this power that many of us have taken for granted. All of you are aware of the dangers of overexerting your mana core. Much like any other muscle in your body, too much strain can cause injuries, sometimes permanent and sometimes fatal. Arthur thought to himself, but that does not explain his deranged behavior and the markings that leaked mana engraved on his back. Meanwhile, Lance Alia expressed, I thought my next mission would be to help Lance Aya and Elenoir. Do you know why Lance Verre called us here? Lance Baron replied, it has to do with something I found in a dungeon on the outskirts of the Beast Glades. Soon, Lance Verre arrived and said, The reason the Council and I have decided to withdraw you from your mission in Alen War with Aya is because we have recently discovered signs in the deepest levels of some dungeons, traces of mages not from Dicathan. Lancelia was shocked and clarified. To my understanding, it was barely discovered that another continent even existed. Lance Baron added, just because we recently discovered them doesn't mean it's the same for them. Vere, has the material been confirmed? Lance Vere continued, the piece of cloth you discovered was composed of mana beast fiber that either has not been discovered or is not indigenous to Dicathan. Baron said, I sensed mana imbued into the fabric as well. Has the Council received any more information on that? Vere replied, whatever spell form was woven into the cloth had been disabled as it was torn. Nevertheless, Aliyah, you have been brought here because of another matter. There have been unusual sightings of titanic bloodworms reported by adventurers in different parts of the beast glades. According to the sightings and cross-checking with some mana beast behavioralists, it seems they have been deviating heavily from their usual tunneling patterns. While it may be a stretch, it is impossible not to connect the recent sightings of rabid mana beasts to the possibility of Alacrians deep in the dungeons. Aliyah said, I would be able to cover a much larger range with my sensory magic. Vere reminded her, you have to work alone so that your speed won't be impeded. It could be dangerous. As Baron had to focus on his deeper areas, Aliyah informed them the chances of adventurers and students still out there running into danger will get higher the longer we wait. I will start investigating immediately. Next day, when Arthur entered the DC office, he noticed that Theodore was sparring with Curtis. Theodore excitedly told Curtis, let's go for round 5. But Kai cast a wave of metal springs in front of them and told them to stop, saying it was Claire's order. Arthur wondered how Kai was controlling the metal springs. There was no sound and he couldn't sense any magic. How was Kai doing it? Claire gathered everyone and announced, as you all know, Arthur, Curtis, and I will be going off campus on a trip to the Beast Glades for our class in a few weeks. So we will be reorganizing our patrol routes. I ended up taking on a few more hours. Fairith volunteered as well, and Doradria raised her hand as Kai used his metal springs to pull her hand up. Later, as they were leaving, Arthur asked Claire about Kai's magic. Claire replied, he's pretty secretive about it. I just know that the metal wires he controls are pretty special. I noticed Arthur's curiosity and walked up to him, saying, have you taken an interest in me? Arthur responded mildly, I'm just curious about how you control your metal wires. Kai smirked and said, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Claire interrupted them and urged them to go to class immediately. Meanwhile, Elijah was sparring with Tobai. Arthur asked Elijah, so you learned magic to be popular with the girls? Elijah replied, maybe a little. In response, Arthur threw him a sword and said even if you're a conjurer, you should learn the basics of melee combat. You know, for the girls. Elijah yelled, damn you and your teasing. During their spar, Arthur noticed that Elijah had stable footwork, always balanced and swung with little wasted movement. With some training, he could actually become a pretty strong swordsman. As Arthur dodged Elijah's attack, Elijah fell to the ground. When he turned his head back up, he saw a blur of a shadow standing right behind Arthur. Elijah felt a headache and kept yelling. He wondered what was happening and why he was experiencing all these emotions. Arthur told him, let's get you to the medic ward. Elijah refused, saying, I'm fine. It's just a bad headache from the faceplant I did. I'll go back first to wash up. Elijah wondered if it was probably just because he hit his head. He said, I'll see you back in the dorm. The next weeks passed by in a steady rhythm of peaceful. Even as we neared mid-cycle exams, it was hard to stay equally enthusiastic with all of my classes. Still, even with my skills as a mage growing with the help of Tobai and my teachers, I never forgot the real reason I ultimately decided to attend school. Arthur noticed that Elijah had been acting a bit strange lately, but every time he asked him about it, Elijah would simply say it was nothing. One day, Elijah told Arthur, don't overdo it on your training with Princess Tasha in Professor Glory's class, and then he left. Sylvia approached Arthur and said, he seems mad at Papa these days. Arthur replied, so you feel it too, right? Later, Arthur spoke to Tesha and said your integration of the beast tool to your mana core is looking a lot more stable lately. Tasha excitedly responded, it's a sign that the mana beasts will fight won't stand a chance against me. Arthur playfully flicked her forehead and told her, don't get too full of yourself. You're probably not even at half your usual strength because of the assimilation process. Tesha retorted, says the guy heading straight into the beast glades while restraining his two most powerful elements. Arthur replied, I know, but I can always remove my limiter. You can't. Tesha said, I know, but you don't have to baby me so much. I'm still a year older than you, remember? Arthur nodded and said, yes, I remember. I also remember this. Beasts are more likely to appear if they notice you out here because they'll see that you're a kid. So, for our safety, you should stay inside the tent and keep guard. Tesha, feeling both shy and angry, pushed Arthur down and started hitting him. Meanwhile, Virion, observing the situation, said, "I wanted the two of you to get closer, but I didn't think I'd be walking into this." Arthur questioned Virion. "I thought you were locked up in meetings with the council." Virion replied, "I just escaped for a quick breather to check up on my precious granddaughter, who is apparently all grown up now." Virion continued, "I was a little worried since the dungeon excursion is tomorrow. I originally wanted to have Cynthia keep an eye on her just in case her core flares up, but she was out. So I hope you'll be with her until your field trip tomorrow." Arthur declined the offer, saying, "I'm not falling for whatever you have planned." However, he ended up bringing Tesha along to his home. Soon as they reached home, Alina pulled Tesha for showing her how good at the bow I have gotten. Meanwhile, another site, Lance Alia was doing her investigation, and she found out Lance Vere was right. There is no way the Titanic bloodworms are moving on their own accord. Based on the pattern of the tunnels, they all seem to be converging to this area and leading further down and east toward the Grand Mountains. Leah dashed toward right tunnel, spotted a Hades serpent, but wonder why does it have horns, and the coloring it has only been recorded as gray with blue fire along its back, and for a species that does not even care for its offspring. It does not make sense for it to be guarding something like a tunnel. Leah then took out communication device, told Vere what she had spotted. Vere told her, "I have 50 battle mages ready to be teleported to the nearest gate. Stand by and wait for further instructions." Back at Tesha's location, she was chatting with Alice, and most of their conversation revolved around Alice's concern for Arthur heading into the dungeon the next day. Alice expressed worry about how unpredictable and dangerous even the most docile dungeon can be. Although Tesha promised to protect Arthur in case anything happened, Alice advised her against it, stating that Tesha was a precious daughter to her parents as well, and her own safety should come first. Alice trusted her son to take care of himself. Arthur informed Alina that he would be leaving the next morning, prompting her to pull him close and request that he tell her a few stories. Arthur shared tales of becoming a professor and his experiences in school life. The following day, Professor Glory instructed everyone to gather with their teams. Arthur suggested to Sylvie that they should use this time to do some hunting while they were in the low-level dungeon, and Professor Glory would be with them the entire time. Lucas boasted about having been in the dungeon countless times until it became too easy for him, emphasizing that he was an A-class adventurer. However, Arthur immediately challenged his claim, mentioning that he had heard Lucas had his license revoked. Lucas grabbed Arthur's shoulder, accusing him of being jealous of his popularity. Clive intervened, telling them they still needed to decide on a team leader before entering the dungeon. Lucas confidently declared that it would be him, but 3 others voted for Tasha due to her experience as the student council president and her ability as a mid-range conjurer to keep an eye on everyone. As they ventured deeper into the dungeon, Professor Glory reminded them to protect themselves with mana at all times. They would only be exploring the first 2 floors, which meant they only had to worry about snarlers, a type of mana beast. However, it seemed strange that they hadn't encountered any yet. Suddenly, Professor Glory halted their progress, causing Curtis to bump into her. She instructed all the students to move back as a horde of snarlers appeared without warning. While Professor Glory swiftly dealt with the snarlers, she wondered why they weren't any stronger than usual but were exhibiting unusual behavior by attacking in large numbers. After defeating all the snarlers, Professor Glory addressed the students, expressing her concerns about the snarlers' behavior. Prioritizing everyone's safety, she decided to call off the excursion. Before she could finish speaking, Lucas cast a fire blast just beside Professor Glory, criticizing her decision and questioning why she brought them there only to leave when things became interesting. Arthur pondered Professor Glory's hesitation, especially with Lance investigating the dungeons. After considering the situation, Professor Glory relented and instructed the students to split into their teams and explore different parts of the floor. She emphasized the need to avoid friendly fire. She warned Lucas that there would be consequences if he repeated his previous action. Tesha designated Arthur as the vanguard, with Clive and Roland covering the left and right respectively. Lucas sarcastically dismissed the seriousness of the situation, referring to it as a mere field trip. Clive became angered, but Arthur intervened, focusing on the bigger challenges that lay ahead. Professor Glory noted that everyone was holding up well due to their training in class. However, they weren't accustomed to prolonged battles, and the number of snarlers seemed to be endless. Eventually, Professor Glory ordered the team to retreat. During the retreat, Roland stumbled and fell. Arthur instructed Tesha to leave first while he dealt with the situation. He realized he needed a single powerful strike to push back the Snarlers, an attack he hadn't tested on Tobai. Arthur instructed Roland to grab onto something and cast Burst Blade. However, his arm cracked in the process. Fortunately, Roland was safe. Suddenly, several Queen Snarlers, which shouldn't have been on that floor, appeared. Professor Glory unleashed her power to confront the Queens and commanded the team to clear the exit. She would handle the Queens herself. Arthur realized that they needed to get everyone across the chasm and break through the blockade to escape. He asked Delphine to accompany him to patch the hole while he would provide cover as a guard. After some time, they successfully completed the task. Arthur then realized they had to clear the debris in one shot, otherwise they would never escape. Meanwhile, he noticed smoke building up and realized that the corpses were blocking the only other airway. He instructed everyone to stop using fire spells and to put out flames if possible because they were running out of oxygen. Sylvie asked Arthur what was wrong, at which he replied that they were currently trapped in the dungeon. He urged her to go and see what the passage looked like from the outside. Arthur suddenly recalled Curtis's beast wool and asked him to cast the World Hull spell to clear the way. Curtis replied that he didn't have enough mana without Grotter present. Arthur told him to turn around and not ask questions, focusing on entering his first phase and producing a blast to break through the rubble. And Delphine helped the others hold back the Snarlers. Arthur removed his limiter and thought about mana transference, a topic that had been studied for years but was deemed a lost cause. Despite someone specializing in the same element as another mage, the mana inside their bodies was not exclusive to that particular element. However, as someone who could manipulate all four elements, Arthur could mimic different types of mana and control the ratio of each element. He hadn't fully mastered this technique and had only tried it a few times. Arthur realized he had been careless that day. He had been so confident entering the dungeon, not expecting anything to go wrong. He had believed he could handle it and protect everyone even if something did go wrong. Power he possessed at his age, compared to his past life, made him lose some rationality. Curtis informed Arthur that he didn't know what Arthur was doing, but he felt confident about entering his first phase. After the World Howl spell was cast, Arthur urged everyone to get out. He observed that even with the strong deviant magic glass shards created by Glory's two elemental affinities, she was being pushed back. Arthur noticed a problem with Tesha's core, but reassured her that they were almost out of there. He realized the situation was dangerous. Why were there two queens in the dungeon when Queen Snarlers were only B-class? It should have been an easy fight for Professor Glory, an A-class adventurer. Something was wrong. Suddenly, there was a rumble, and they noticed a Snarler devouring another and evolving. Glory told everyone to get out quickly. Arthur realized that this was not good and that Professor Glory might not make it out of this. He passed Tesha to Claire, and Curtis grabbed Arthur, telling him not to be stupid and leave that beast to Professor Glory. However, blue flames appeared on Arthur's arm, shocking both Claire and Curtis. Glory was shocked when she saw Arthur coming back with his blue flames, but she immediately said, "I told everyone to leave." Arthur replied, "Well, I didn't think it applied to a fellow professor." Lucas spotted Arthur's fire magic as well while he was leaving. Glory told Arthur that the beast wouldn't follow them out of the dungeon, and they just needed to weaken it enough to escape. Glory kept the beast distracted for 10 seconds while Arthur prepared his powerful blow. Glory was surprised to think that Arthur was a tri-elemental mage. Soon, Arthur gathered lightning, fire, and wind and cast Burst Blade Storm, causing his hand to crack once again. The attack loosened his sword on the beast's body. Glory grabbed Arthur and ran all the way outside. While they were moving out, the mana beast grabbed Arthur, and his whole body started to explode. After an explosion, Arthur fell all the way down. He tried hard to cast mana on his only remaining arm to grab onto the side, but failed. He thought he had no choice but to try and survive the fall, even with mana rotation. He didn't have much mana left, but it should be enough. He cast Wind Torrent on the bottom to reduce the damage of the fall. After a while, Arthur woke up, and he noticed Sylvia's beast will enhanced senses then and regenerative ability now. Arthur wondered even at full strength it'd be hard to climb back up that hole, so he followed the sound of running water. When Arthur come out from water curtain, the scene shocked him. There's a lot of death bodies in front of him, and he hear a cough. As Arthur found her, he noticed it is Lancelia. Arthur thought it can't be. She is a white core mage, Lance. Alia questioned, "Who are you?" Arthur told him, "We met at Xyrus Academy before. You said I would be the same age as your brother." And Alia remembered the boy spying on Baron. Arthur's still trying what he can do, but Aaliyah stopped him and said, "You know it as well that I can't be saved." Arthur said, "I am sorry." Aaliyah replied, "Why are you apologizing? I feel much better than before thanks to you." Aaliyah told Arthur she's still alive because the guy kept me alive for this long as revenge for laying a hand on him. Aaliyah told Arthur, "Come over, and with her shattered core, she should be able to show you with the mana you imbued into me earlier." In Aaliyah's memories, they successfully took down the mana beast, but suddenly Blackhorn Demon cast an area of effect magic, stab on everyone. He give two options to Aaliyah: either you can try to fight and die, or you kill every one of your teammates so that you can live. Aaliyah cast multiple attacks towards the guy, but end up by her arm got rip off, as well as both legs. Black-horned Demon continued, said, "I read that if one of your sense is destroyed, the others get better. Can you hear your dying soldier more clearly?" After all, Aaliyah cried and said, "I don't want to die." Arthur cried as well and gave her a hug. But anyway, she is died. Arthur thought, "I told myself that Aaliyah's death was not in vain." Through her memories, I found out that there was more than just one Black-horned Demon, and while I was not sure how many, there were definitely after something, just like the first one I met in Sylvia's cave. Whether this demon wanted Sylvie or Dick Ethan as a while, it would not make a difference. Quedra elemental or not, I would not stand a chance. If what the demon said about a war brewing here was true, then I could no longer be complacent to protect the ones I have grown to love and cherish in this world. I needed to get stronger. Arthur cast ice magic cover-up Lance. Aaliyah told her, "You won't be alone for long. I will send people to come back for you and for all of you." Soon Arthur leave there with Sylvie. The first thing he do is back to home first, as everyone inside is probably worrying about him. Arthur sit and outside. He thought Aaliyah's last words ran in my mind, her fear of being alone, or fear of death, whether it is through luck or by design. I just hoped that maybe she would end up like me, getting a second chance at life. Ray walked out telling Arthur, "Don't need to say anything. I don't know if you noticed, your mother can only use her healing magic on minor wounds. Just like you may be feeling now, your mother has her scars that, even till today, she can't put into words. So don't force yourself. Everyone has their own battle that they need to fight. And just like for your mother, I will be here for you, waiting for you to come out victorious. Learn from it and get stronger from it so you can win the war." Next day, Arthur went to find Cynthia. Cynthia said, "Professor Glory has already told me about the anomaly with the Queen Snarlers. Was there something more that occurred down there?" Arthur passed Lance Aaliyah's pendant to Cynthia and told her what had happened. Cynthia was shocked to learn about Lance Aaliyah's death. Arthur informed her that their bodies were still on the bottom floor of the widow's crypt. Cynthia wondered they must already be here and asked Arthur if he saw what had caused it. Arthur replied that he did not. Cynthia told him that she would immediately inform the council about the situation and advised Arthur not to concern himself with it anymore. She said it was beyond his capabilities and that he should let the council and the other Lances handle whoever or whatever was responsible. While Arthur's family was busy choosing clothing, Arthur decided to visit a store that Aunt Tabitha had mentioned. Outside the store, he suddenly noticed a man who had gone unnoticed by his senses. The old man approached Arthur and asked for some spare change. In a quick motion, the old man took the coin from Arthur's hand, and it was only then that Arthur realized he had given the man a silver coin instead of a bronze one. Before he could chase after the old man, he had already disappeared. Upon Arthur opened the store door and saw the old man standing there, then Arthur quickly demanding his coin back. Arthur explained that he had thought the old man was homeless based on his appearance and where they had met. The old man countered that he had only referred to himself as a mere aged man, and Arthur had made assumptions. The man then offered Arthur any item of his choice for free. Arthur searched the store but couldn't find anything of value for a silver coin. Then he noticed a cat that had been staring at him for a while. Soon Arthur, still unable to find anything, then Sylvie approached him. Arthur told the old man that he couldn't find anything, but the old man briefly focused on Sylvie before taking out a rainbow pearl and giving it to Arthur, saying he would need it. Then pushed Arthur out of the store. As Arthur left, he noticed the cat smiling at him once again. And Arthur went to meet his family, but from Tabitha word the store have variety of elixirs and medicines. They are quite famous. It is always overcrowded with students trying to get new training materials. But Arthur wondered what? That shabby old place? But when they backed there again, it is completely different. Come to Lucas' site. Charles brought Lucas to see someone wearing a mask. From the conversation, Lucas couldn't sense the masked guy's mana level at all. This masked guy is recruiting capable mages to execute his plans while he waits, and Lucas happens to be one of them. Everyone in this group is a dissatisfied human noble who once took pride in the belief that Xyrus was built exclusively for the purest lineages. The masked guy said, "You may be the exception, but I believe them might though. The students and the structure of this school also upset you? Mr. Wykes, Lucas replied, why should I waste my time and energy on bugs I could squish at any time? These peasants at the academy are no better than the low-class adventurers flailing around with their weapons. Lucas decided to leave. Masked Guy continued, you are a rather prideful mage who finds lower-class people weak. But did your friend Arthur Lewin not prove that wrong? You may have been hailed as a prodigy and pampered with elixirs since your awakening, but you are no match for Arthur Lewin. The sad thing is, he was never even trying, and you knew that. After Lucas recalled that Arthur is even hiding his fire magic all the time, he questioned the masked guy, who are you? Masked Guy replied, I am but a mere benefactor who came here for the betterment of this land. Mr. Wykes, I thought I had already made it clear that we could have a mutual benefit in this. Soon I will be able to personally strike, and when I do, the frail bonds between the three races will shatter. I currently have the council and this academy's director occupied, so the stage is set. Mr. Wykes, I just need you to help with loose ends. Lucas replied, loose ends? I'm assuming Arthur Lewin happens to be one of them. Masked Guy clapped his hands and said, very good. It looks like your elven half did not affect your ability to think. Lucas continued, if, as you said, Arthur has not even been trying, how do you expect me to kill him? And if you expect me to take whatever drug you gave Marquis? The masked guy interrupted. That pig was weak. If you are as strong as you think you are, then you will be able to control the powers that I will bestow upon you. And trust me, these powers will be on a different level. Arthur is only human, and he places great importance on his family and friends, but one person in particular, Tesha Iralith. And would you think that just the slightest bit of elf princess blood being shed will get your dear Arthur riled up? Soon Arthur told Elijah that he is okay. Elijah told him the Claire's recount of what happened, so it was hard to believe that you were okay. And Director Gooksey mentioned Tesha with her grandfather right now in one of the training rooms. You should go visit everyone so they see for themselves that you are okay. While Arthur was on his way to the training room, Sylvie urgently told him to hurry as something happened to Mama. When the door opened, it was covered in black smoke. As he walked further, Arthur noticed Tasha being covered by vines. Miriam was unsure about the situation, noticed that her beast's will was causing problems with the assimilation, as if it was trying to fight back against Tasha's body. For no apparent reason, Arthur's ring started to shine when he touched the vines. The vines began to attack Arthur, but he told Sylvie to stay with Virion and be careful not to hurt Tasha. Suddenly, the rainbow pearl that Arthur got from the store emerged from his dimensional ring and flew towards Tasha. The vines disappeared, and a few seconds later, Tasha woke up and ran towards Arthur, giving him a hug instead of Virion. Virion thought to himself, my dear granddaughter, you went the wrong way. Maybe the passing breeze will accept my embrace. Despite everything, Arthur still didn't understand why the orb from the old man flew into Tasha like that. It seemed to have calmed her down for now, but did it really help her? According to the doctor, Tasha's vitals were stable now and the circulation of mana throughout her body was not impeded. But there was one thing that didn't make sense. Doctor mentioned that Tasha's core was at the light orange stage, but even as a dark yellow core mage, couldn't measure her mana core. Virion walked toward and checked on Tasha, finding out that she was even better and her core was almost at the initial silver stage now. Arthur and Virion decided to leave Tasha to rest. Arthur asked Virion to tell him more about the lances. Arthur wondered how much more powerful white core mages were compared to silver core mages. He estimated that it took about 20 solid yellow core mages to hold off a single silver core mage, but he was curious about the exponential power increase between silver and white. Virion, being a mid-silver core mage, estimated that it would take about 10 mages like himself to keep a mid-white core mage at bay. For someone like Cynthia, a high silver mage, it would take maybe 6 or 7 of her. Arthur questioned how